Welcome everybody to the next episode of the Cannabis Review. I am delighted to be joined in this episode by Violet-Anne Wynne TD. Violet-Anne Wynne is a TD for an independent politician who represents the constituency of Clare and has been a TD since the 2020 election. She also studied psychology at Trinity College Dublin and was a former member of the Defence Reserve Forces. Violet-Anne, how are you keeping today?
I'm doing good, Owen. Thanks a million for having me on.
I'm delighted to have you on. The objective here is to try and get as clear a communication and information to the policymakers and medical professionals. So I very much appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today.
Yep.
So I've got a couple of questions that basically I'm going to start with. The narrative of the medical cannabis access program in Ireland seems to be a bit miscued by people are understanding it in different ways. And some people think it's terrible. Some people think it's okay. In terms of moving the needle of the medical cannabis access program being changed, which do you think is going to be more influential to help change the policy? Is it going to be Germany legalizing their medical market and the influence that may have on basically just how cannabis is viewed by politicians, number one? Is it two, going to be the Irish industry itself creating events around commerce and law and medicine to be able to help educate as many decision makers and policy makers and top leading business people? Or do you think it's going to be activists at the ground root level getting in touch with their politicians and helping to expand the program for patients?
I think it may be a case of the combination of all three there. I think the news that we seen on Wednesday around, I suppose, Germany and the steps that they are taking to, I suppose, legalize the recreational use and production of cannabis is going to be hugely beneficial to Ireland. I know the legislation won't be in place till 2024, but it still will, I suppose, pave the way for Ireland in coming to those similar conclusions as well. And I think we will definitely benefit from any research that comes from, I suppose, Germany taking that step. I know that at this point, they have 128,000 people within Germany who are accessing medicinal cannabis. So already we should be availing of any medical research that's coming from that cohort of people. It's a substantial amount of people to be in receipt of medicinal cannabis. And I think then in reference to your other 2 points, I think absolutely it's a lot of change and I suppose progression that you would see in Ireland comes first and foremost from the likes of activists who are reaching out and constantly educating the policymakers, the elected representatives, and relaying, I suppose, their own stories about how not having legislation in place is impacting them and their families. So the MCAP in Ireland, was just a pilot scheme, and it's to be reviewed in 5 years. I know there has been some advances there made in 2021 around, I suppose, the reimbursement and access to reimbursement. But I think, in general, it was incredibly restrictive, and especially in comparison to other high income European countries. Our model is entirely restrictive, I suppose, in terms of the conditions that a patient can have to be able to qualify or apply for the scheme. So at this current time, it's spasticity associated with MS, it's intractable nausea and vomiting associated with chemotherapy, and severe refractory epilepsy that would be treatment resistant. So it's very limited, I suppose, in respect of those who may medically qualify. And then there are also the other issues then around, I suppose, reimbursement because of, I suppose, the medications or the cannabis-based products that would be approved for treatment. So I think there's a long way to go in terms of the MCAP being, I suppose, widened out there to to other patients who would be suffering from all sorts of illnesses and would need, I suppose, the access to medicinal cannabis. Chronic pain is one of the first ones that jumps out to me, just, I suppose, in relation to the recent report done where I think it was the Irish Examiner, one of the newspapers anyway, had looked at specific patients who had to either relocate outside of Ireland just to be able to access medicinal cannabis, and those were sufferers of chronic pain.
Yeah, no, I agree totally with you. And do you think it's a case of, we can understand policymakers would have zero knowledge on the cannabis industry, and I think that's unfair to expect policymakers at this stage to have a nuanced opinion on how this industry should go. Do you think the government are going to be happier with, we know of a number of biosciences companies and biotechnology companies that are utilizing new methods to be able to create cannabinoids that are going to be purified. Do you think that's a more palatable solution for politicians to be able to get behind, or do you think it won't matter in the long term once they get the information, the data that verifies the industry for them?
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of maybe fear and stigma towards this issue in particular. And I think obviously education is the best way of stamping them out, and awareness. And I think until we see the Citizens' Assembly sit, which is due, I think, in January of 2023, yep, that's where I would imagine a lot of those issues will be will be able to be looked at in depth. And I suppose then it will inform the policymakers to be able to make the right choices. And we will be able to avail of a lot of the research that would be out there as is, just looking at the likes of Portugal, which led the way to decriminalising all drugs in 2001 and introducing a diversion scheme. And now we know 20 years on, drug deaths have declined in Portugal while rising in the EU. And the UN estimates that over 30 countries so far have decriminalised drug possession for personal use in some form. In Ireland, decriminalisation could encourage service development and take up, and really change societal attitudes towards people with addiction. So I'm really looking forward to the Citizens' Assembly, even though I was extremely disappointed to see that it was delayed and put off till next year. But I suppose now that we're coming to the end of this year now, I suppose I'm really just anticipating, I suppose, what conversation and what research and what I suppose organizations we're going to be hearing from through that platform.
Okay, Brendan, so maybe you can give me a bit of clarity on the Citizens' Assembly in January 2023. Have you been part of a Citizens' Assembly before? What is the exact structure of them, and how do they, let's say, ascertain the best piece of information for the government to be able to utilize with policy?
I haven't actually been a part of a Citizens' Assembly thus far, but I have, I suppose, watched a number of the meetings that they have had, like, for example, the Gender Equality Citizens' Assembly. And I know that they hear from experts on the issue, and they also, I suppose, discuss at length and in depth for a period of time, which could be several months, where they're looking at the relevant research and data that is there, and also looking at other countries who have, I suppose, in this case, legalized medicinal cannabis, and for the number of patients. Like, so for example, the 128,000 in Germany, I would imagine there would be a lot of discussion around what patients were able to receive access to medicinal cannabis in those cases, and also the positive, I suppose, evidence that the treatment worked.
Okay, very good. And in terms of the biggest roadblock, let's say, for Ireland to get past, do you think it's stigma? Do you think it's just an old mentality, or do you think it's just a lack of knowledge? And as I said, there's no party at blame as far as I'm concerned. It'd be like bringing quantum computing to the government, there's nobody's going to know and understand about it. It's up to us to be able to help educate. So do you think it is just one of those three or a combination of all three?
Well, I think it is definitely, there has been a huge stigma towards, I suppose, cannabis in general. And, there's many polar sides of the coin, I suppose, as in you have some people who would see it as harmless completely. And then I would know of people who would, be terrified to even talk about cannabis. Never mind, I suppose, go any further than that. So I think there is a huge stigma. But I think, obviously education is the way forward there, and awareness as well. And I think just in terms of, I suppose, how we have looked at drugs, I mean, any kind of research that I've looked into, you would see on countless occasions the war on drugs and the impact addiction has on the individual, but also beyond that, their family and the community. So I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that area.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. So in terms of the Citizens Assembly, if there was a group or a team of activists or a team of business people in Ireland who wanted to get information into the Citizens Assembly, is it an open platform where people can send in content that can be reviewed and be discussed on the day, or is it a set template of these are the topics we're going to talk to?
I would have to find out for you, as I've never partaken, but just going by any committees that I've been on since being elected, they would usually, I suppose, agree as a group on a work plan, and in that they will choose to hear from particular experts and individuals and organizations, but they may look for a public consultation as well, and allow for people to be able to submit their own stories, or I suppose their own situation through the Citizens Assembly. But I wouldn't be 100% sure, and I'd have to find out for you, Owen. But I would imagine that would be the framework that they would follow.
Yeah, because there seems to be a large quantity of highly intelligent and well-educated business people and activists already in the Irish scene that possess a lot of information. Our own Natalie O'Regan would be one, Barrister Niall Nelligan would be another. And I think being able to utilize that information that's been built over a number of years would definitely fast forward and enhance the political purview that they already look at.
Yep. Absolutely. They've been doing great work over the last number of years, and some of those I would actually read their research quite often. So they're doing great work, fantastic work on this issue.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. They deserve a lot of praise. The people who've been in this for years, just trying to highlight that a patient can have access to more than one solution for pain relief and more than one solution for neuropathic pain. And I think that's what the cruxus of the situation is. Why wouldn't patients be allowed to have a greater range of product that they can choose from themselves? It's not as if it's trying to be stuffed down somebody's throat. It's more about options for patients who are going through various ailments.
Yeah, and it's also about those who, I think there's only currently 6 products included in the MCAP at the moment. And there are those even with, I suppose, severe epilepsy where, those 6 products, wouldn't be, I suppose, it wouldn't be prescribed to them, even if, I suppose, the MCAP was fully operational. There's hesitancy still there. So, yeah, I would agree with, I suppose, expanding the number of products that would be approved as well, and also the conditions that people would have to be able to avail of the MCAP.
Yeah, no, very understandable. I know you're a very busy lady, so I'm not going to keep it for too much longer. I'd love to be able to touch base at the end of January after the Citizens Assembly and maybe give everybody an overview of all the information that we've gotten to date. But for now, thank you very much for your time, Violet-Anne. It's very much appreciated.
Thank you, Owen. Talk to you again.
Not until next episode, everybody.